This morning we're going to be looking at how to make a multi-screen app using iOS. We're going to be continuing our About Me app we started off with at the beginning of the year using App Inventor. We've made it already once in Android using Java. And we're going to continue with it using Swift for iOS. To start off, we have our starting new project. I just used the regular Xcode Start New Project wizard. As you can see right here, I'm selecting the single view application. I'll go ahead and set next. My product name is going to be my About Me app. Our usual class standard is CTEC, since that's where we are. It gives us an identifier of CTEC. We have that bundle identifier, CTEC.AboutMe. We are using Swift as our language, and we're going to have unit tests because we'll be wanting to have that standard good structure for that. We have those basic standards set up. We're going to go ahead and hit next. Brings us to the main screen. I'm going to go ahead and in my Swift project folder, I'm going to make it right here. It's inside my regular Swift projects folder. I hit create. Starts off my project. As you can see, I have my regular standard approach for that. Now, again, we want to keep up that good process of keeping our projects and our code in source control. For class, we've been using GitHub all year, so we're going to continue with that right here. So we're going to right-click over here to our Finder folder. We're going to go to my Documents folder, go to my Swift Projects folder, and here's my About Me app we just started. I'm going to add that to GitHub. Do I want to create a new repository? Yes, I do. And I've got this set up so it's going to add the information. I have 13 files that are getting changed on that. So my scheme files, my user state files, which are all part of that actual structure right there. And so it's just my first commit. And I'll commit to my master. And go ahead and publish it. And I'm making sure I have this About Me -iOS so we know that it's going to be in that iOS family. Publish my repository. It's now pushed to GitHub. We've got that ready to go. We're going to go ahead and go back to Xcode then. And so we've already got our project added to GitHub immediately, so we can immediately get that stuff set up. Now, here's one of the new things we're going to be using. This is a new feature specifically for iOS development. And we've been using packages in Java all year. And when we do C# development, we use namespaces, which are the same thing. Inside Swift, we use groups. Same idea, just a little bit different. So we're going to go ahead and get that started here with this project. Again, we're going to keep that idea. We're going to get that set up. So over here in our lovely Project Navigator, inside that folder, which is accessed through Control-0 or Control-1 to get that to pull up immediately. And we're going to go over here, and inside the About Me folder, I'm going to right-click on that. I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a new group. And the group is how we're going to name our model view controller structure, how we've been using that all year. And so this is going to be our controller group. And so I just made a new folder. It's called Controller. Now, this is merely a logical folder. It does not exist on the hard drive. It is only here in Xcode that we see this. So this is just for organizing our code inside the actual development environment. It doesn't have any impact to our code itself. I'm going to do another one right here also for view. And on later projects, we will add a model as well. This project, however, we don't have a model, so we don't have to worry about that. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag my app delegate and my view controller files into my controller group. And so now you can see that my controller group has inside it the appdelegate.swift and the viewcontroller.swift. My storyboard I'll also add to my view, as well as my assets.xc assets. So I've made those changes to that where I have my view has my assets folder and my storyboard file. My controller group has the appdelegate.swift and the viewcontroller.swift files. So we've got that set up right there, ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and just save that because it's easy to do so. Now, to make it so we can have a swapping in screens, this is a very different setup than what we did inside App Inventor, as well as a different way of doing it from Android Dev using Android Studio. So we're going to go ahead, I'm going to, right here inside my storyboard, get that active. I'm going to close my Project Navigator window screen. And I'm going to leave my utility window screen open. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this view down to 25%. So it's a little, let's do 50. 25 is a little small. And so as you can see, we have my reference to my view controller right here. And in my objects list, or object library list, one of the first ones on there is a view controller. I'd like you to go ahead and drag a couple of those over right onto your project. So just drag one into your area, drag a few of them over. So we now have 4 view controllers listed inside our storyboard. Great time to save. If it's a great time to save, what's a great time to do? commit. So go over to our GitHub, go to our committed changes, and added view controllers to storyboard. So again, to add those in, I just go over to my storyboard. I have my utility window open, and in my object library, I dragged over instances of viewController into my storyboard. Now you have to have at least 4 for the assignment. You can have more. So zoom out, click on a blank area right here, right click, and choose your zoom. Or you can use Command plus, Command minus. So I'll probably use the Command minus and plus myself. Probably a lot faster. Back on track, we have 4 new viewController instances in our storyboard. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make sure they're specified. We're going to name them, keeping up that process of naming our components so we actually know what they are so we can use them effectively. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to select one right here. And I have it selected right here on that. This is my original one. I can tell it's the original because it's this lovely arrow right here, indicating that it is the beginning one. It is the entry point. I can also identify it's the entry point by going over to my attributes inspector, and it'll have a checkbox right here saying is initial view controller.
Wait, is the arrow?
The arrow shows the initial view controller. Okay. And so my title on this one, I can just simply give this about me. See.
How did you get to that window?
So this window right here is on the utilities section, which either is Alt-Control-0, sorry, Alt-Command-0, or this lovely 3 section right up here. And then I clicked on the one with it's the attributes inspector. It's one that looks like kind of like a tab pointing down. And so now my About Me has a title. Instead of simply View Controller, it has the title of About Me. I'm going to do the same thing for my other screens or my other views. I will get it selected, and this one will be Family. And then I have School. And then I have Running. So I've now titled all 4 of my current screens. They also have a reference now over here on the outline. So the question on that is, should your title be your titles? And yes, of course, they should be the titles for your About Me app itself. I just simply put mine because mine, I have Family, I have School, I have Running, I have something else on mine. I'm just using this as a sample so we can help you guys build your own. So I've got that title now for all of them. They all have a title scene. And so I can see that right here I have that. We have those basic components. Now to make this, to get the basic part done, all these will need a button so I can swap from one screen to the next. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to each of these. I'm going to go to Button on here. And I'm going to drag a button onto this screen. Oh, forgot, I have to put that up to full size. You have to have a full size for doing buttons, so drag a button on there. Button in the middle right there. Drag a button over here to its middle. Drag a button over here to its middle. And drag a button over here to this one's middle. So I've got that right there. Now, these are all set for the larger screen. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the lovely bit of selection right here. So I'm going to go back to my About Me. I've got my size right here, and I'm going to put these all for iPhone 5.5, just because it's a little bit easier. Click on the selection. I go to its Attributes Inspector, and I choose its size from Inferred to iPhone 5.5. So as you can see right now, I have my 4 different screens. They're really hard to see, though, on my screen right now, right? So to tell them apart even better, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up and I'm going to click on my Family one right here. And I'm going to go to my Properties Inspector. I'm going to go to the actual view for it right here. So my view is selected. I selected View over here on the left-hand side of my property outline. I have it selected, and then I'm going to change my background color. Instead of being boring white, my Family one would be a nice magenta purple color. And then I can, they change the name. So I click on it so it's highlighted for the scene itself. Over here on the right, the view controller is specified, and I give it a title. Okay, so now you can clearly see what all my different ones are. So I have 4 different screens that I'm going to be sending and working with. We also have the About Me scene right here. I can find it out just by this. They have a title for each of those different components. And so this is my GUI component. I've added some features to this. Great time to save. Great time to commit. So I have my commit now on that. I've got my 4 screens set up. There's nothing much in them. You're going to need to add your components to it as you need. Now, we'll talk about more about that in just a second. Right now, we want to start the process of making the ability to change between scenes. So we're going to get the first process for one. I'm going to go through and just show you how to do it. Then you're going to help me do it again on the second one. So what I have right here is I need to go ahead and I need to make some files now for each of these different screens. Each scene or view controller needs an associated file. So to fix that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to Alt-Command-0 to get rid of the the right-hand window, Command-0 to open up the left-hand window, and in my controller folder, I'm going to add 3 new view controller files. So I'm going to right-click on my controller folder or group. I'm going to go to New File, and it's a Swift file. It's under the iOS package. It's a Swift file, and I just hit Next. And this one is going to be my running view controller .swift. So it's going to match my running view. I will also be making the same file for a school view and a family view. So I have immediately my running view controller .swift. It's in my About Me project, automatically built for me. I'm going to go ahead and start my add to this. The first one I'm going to add is import and UIKit. And then I'm going to make a class, and its name is running view controller. And it's going to inherit from UIViewController. So I have my first setup right here where I'm making a new class. It's in my controller group. It's a class called running view controller, and it inherits from UIViewController. We're going to do that same process for my other 2 files that I have, family and school. So the process again, can someone help me do this?
Click on the right and controller, click on the right button.
Right click on controller.
Go to New File.
New File.
Swift File.
It's a Swift file.
And then you're going to name it Family ViewController.swift.
And I keep my same naming convention of capitalizing each letter of the first letter of the word.
Yep.
It's inside my About Me project. Notice that there's no folder in here for controller. Controller is only seen inside Xcode.
And then press Create.
I press Create.
And then you go underneath Import Foundation, and you're going to import UIKit, and then you go under it, and then you go Class, Family View Controller, and then you import.
And then I do a colon for inherits from.
Yeah.
And it's from UI
View
Controller. And then I give my great friends the squiggles.
Yeah, that's 100%.
Okay, let's do that one more time. We have one more file to add.
Someone else. Then.
What?
So I have my family, I have my running. What was my other one that I said?
I don't know. Pick one.
It was school. You guys pick whatever of your ones you have to do.
Oh.
So my school view controller.swift. And again, the same thing. I'm going to import. What do I import, everybody?
UIKit.
UIKit. And then I make a class. Its name is school view controller. And it inherits from UIViewController. So I have my files now for all of this. I have my viewController.swift, which is my main one, my running view controller, my family view controller, my school view controller. All of these files inherit from UIViewController. I'm going to hit save on them to make sure that I've saved. This is also now a great time to commit because I've added files and I've got the structure for them. We have that now, these 4 views right here, they're all set up. They all inherit from UIViewController, so they all match what I have right here in class viewController, which inherits from UIViewController. Now, all these classes are going to have the same basic format. They're all going to need these 2 methods for viewDidLoad and didReceiveWarning. The viewDidLoad method is just like the Android version of onCreate. So Android's onCreate is what you do when you load the screen. In iOS, it's viewDidLoad for Swift. So these methods right here, we want to copy and paste into each of them. So this is a great time for copy pasta. Command C over here. We'll go to running viewController. We'll add it into that one. Pasta that. Pasta there. And finally, a subsequent pasta inside my school viewController. So I've got my view controllers are all set up now for they all have the basic feature of it calls the super viewDidLoad and the super didReceive memory warning as their default method of code. So you have those basic functionality are taken care of for our project. Okay, not a huge change, but it's something we have to do. So we now have built framework for this. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to actually be able to link our views to our view controllers. And this is why it's important to set up our GUI stuff here first, and then get the framework built, then build the actual framework for our code. Then we're going to go through and build the actual linkage. So save that right here. I'm going to close my left-hand window, or my project navigator, with Command 0. I'm going to open up my quick view to go to my from my controller view to my storyboard view. As you can see, I have access now to all of my different components. And what I need to do is I need to link each individual screen to its associated view controller file. So we're going to start off by looking at the default one, my About Me one. So I'm going to go up to my regular screen, which is Control Command equals, gets me full screen. I'm going to go to my first one, open up my inspector for utilities, and I click on that so it's highlighted for my actual About Me. We know this is the initial view controller with that checkbox right there. I'm going to go over to my attributes inspector, which is the third one over. It looks kind of like a newspaper. Excuse me, my identity inspector. It looks like the newspaper. And if you notice right here that the About Me scene, specifically the view controller, which is the yellow circle, it's linked to viewcontroller.swift. That is its linked file. So if I do Alt-Command-Enter and open up my assistant editor, it will link me to my viewController class. Hooray! However, if I go over to one of my other scenes, say for example running scene, right here, and I do Alt-Command-Enter, I get linked to some random stuff that's not my code. This is a problem. It has, if you notice over here in my utility, it has no reference to what I'm linked to. That's a problem. We want to reference it to our code. So to fix that, I'm going to close my assistant editor. I'm going to go back to my little yellow circle over here in my outline list so it's highlighted. I go to my identity inspector. And under custom class, instead of leaving it blank, I'm going to type in my running view controller. And because I've already created it, it has a nice little reference to it right there. And I hit save. And to test to make sure it works, I open up my assistant editor, Alt-Command-Enter. And now I have a reference right here to my running view controller. So again, to do that, I go to my I'll close the screen to show it. I select my view controller by clicking on the yellow line, yellow circle. Over in my identity inspector, aka the newspaper icon, in the custom class, I give it the name of the file that I actually have created for that view controller. And because I named it the running view controller, it makes it really easy to attach it to the running scene. Craziness. So let's practice this again with the school one. So I'm going to go to my school scene. Click on the school view controller, aka the yellow circle. It brings up its associated identity section right here on my utility panel. And what do I put in its custom class? If this is the school scene, school view controller is correct. Thank you. So let's put in school view controller. It auto types it for me. I hit save again. Always great to save. Let's repeat that process for family. I click on my family identifier for my view controller. What do I put? Someone over in this half of the classroom. What do I put in my custom class? The view controller. And so this is family scene. What would I put right here? Family view controller. So it matches exactly what I typed. It keeps it easy. I save that. I'm going to close my utility panel. And I'm now going to open up my assistant editor and check to make sure that all these work. So family links to family view controller. School links to school view controller. Running links to running view controller. And about me links to view controller. This is a great thing to do. We've got our linking done. Great time to save. And a great time to what? Commit. Let's do so. So looking at my history of my commits, I made my first commit of the repo. I added my view controllers just to the GUI. I then changed the color so they could be easily recognized. I then added a view controller for each screen. And now I just went through and linked all of them, the GUI part to the associated code part. Question?
How do you name the pages again?
So the question was, how do I name the pages again? So let's go back to Xcode. I'm going to go over here to my storyboard and close my assistant editor. And I'm going to minimize this down a bit, so it'll shrink a bit. Okay. And I'm going to close my right side, open up my left side. And so the question was, how do I make it so I can rename those individual scenes? So I click on my About Me, or the top card right here. And if I go over to my Property Inspector, I believe it's Property? Nope, Attributes Inspector, excuse me. I go to Attributes Inspector, and under View Controller, I have a space for a title. So I click on the View Controller associated with it. On the scene, I can change its title right here. Okay, so how did I link them all up? Again, let's refresh that one. So I click on my associated view controller part of the GUI, which is right here, the yellow circle. I go over to the Attributes Inspector, Identity Inspector, sorry. That's Attributes. This is Identity Inspector. I go to Identity Inspector, and on Custom Class, I put the associated view controller class with it. So the About Me is the default one. It's with view controller. My family one is with my family view controller. My school one is with school view controller. And running, of course, will be with what? Running view controller. And those are all listed over here in my controller group right here. Let's go ahead and let's make our first linking button so we can have our button switch between screens. So I'm going to remove that screen and that screen. So I'm only showing my storyboard. So we want to actually link the screens together so they have a way of transitioning from one to the other. As I said, we're going to use what's called a modal screen transition. So to do that, I have my screen right here. I have it shrunk down a bit so I can actually see it in my view. So right now I believe I'm at probably 50%. Yep, 50%. 100% really doesn't work for this because it's really hard to see. And I think actually you can't do it. So I'm going to click right here and hold the control key down for my About Me, and then drag as I hold the control key to my family scene.
Wow.
As you notice, I have a link that shows up.
Present modally.
And I want to present that modally, correct. So I present that modally, and we now notice that there is a link between those two scenes. It is identified by a line with a circle with a square.
Show me this graph.
So I'm going to remove this and do it again so you can watch it. So I have my view set for 50% or less. I control click on my original scene and drag to my next scene. You can tell it identifies because of the blue background. I choose on that the present modally, and it creates a link right here. I'm then going to open up my lovely side window on the right, my utilities panel. I'm going to select my segue that I just made. That's that circle with a square. I'm going to go to its inspector, and I'm going to give it an identifier. I'm going to call this toFamily. So it is a segue identified by the circle with the square on that line. The identifier name is called toFamily because that makes a nice sense since I'm going to the family scene. So I've made one right here. Let's make another one right here as a class. So let's guide me through this. I want to go from my family to school. So in order to link a segue from family to school, what do I need to do? First thing I need to do is, before I control, I need to Click. So I select first family, then I control click. And what do I do after I control click? I drag to school. And it identifies it by circling it with that lovely, or not circling it, excuse me, highlighting it with that lovely blue hover bar. I release. And what do I choose on that pop-up window? Present modally. So I've now presented a mode. If I click on this and move it down here a bit, we can see it a little bit closer. I have that line that indicates a circle with a square. Fantastic. I click on that circle with a square so it's identified. And what is the name of my segue?
To school.
To school. So how do I do it from school to running? Someone tell me. Control click on school.
And drag to running.
Drag to running.
And present modally.
Present modally. And now I have it presenting there. And I go over to my segue. And what do I put in my identifier?
To running.
To running. So the question was, if I want to change from one screen to multiple other screens, will I need to have multiple segues? The answer is yes. And we'll work on that in just a second. Okay, I need one final segue to go back to my home screen. So I click on my running screen, control click up to home, choose a present modally. I now have that. I click on my screen to drag that down so I can actually see that lovely little link right there. I name it with an identifier of to home. So I now have a transition from every screen all the way across. You guys can do this in whichever way you want. So if you have multiple buttons, that's fine. You'll notice that as I drag these around, the links stay really nice. But we have now a reference from all of them. However, we don't have a link for them in code. We have to actually present that link now code-wise. But because we made some changes to our actual structure, it's a great time to commit. So I'm going to go to my commit, go to my changes, and I linked or created segues. Again, it's always good to have lots of commits. You can always look at what you're doing and see what happened. Also, again, with those multiple commits, you can use that to then help you build your reflection on your project that might be helpful for later assignments. The segue is the behind-the-scenes code for the transition. It's how we connect the code between the screens, which allows it to swap between them. We're going to see how it works here in just a second. So the question again was, do I have to have the buttons first before I can do the segues? No. I just did that first because I want to make sure it's clearly easy that we can see them immediately. Okay, so our next step is to do the start linking the code to have it change first. So let's go ahead and we're going to link this. We're going to first open up our assistant editor, Alt-Command-Enter. I'm going to go from my About Me screen to my Family screen. So I'm going to close off my lovely utility folder so I have a little bit less, more screen space for this.
Should we be on our main one?
So I'm on my main one, yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to click on my button, which means I have to get this up to full size.
Oh, that's nice.
The fast way for full size is Control Command equals. I click on my button so it can be selected, or I can simply collect it over here on my outline, which will also bring it to full size immediately.
How do I go back?
And I am going to control drag from my button to my associated controller. So I'm going to add a reference for this button inside my code. So to do that, again, I don't need access to my view right here, so I'm going to close my side window open, give myself the best available view. So I have my button selected. It's clearly selected right here in my outline, or I have it selected right here on the actual GUI. Remember, in order to work on this, you have to be at 100%. Okay? I'm going to control drag from my button into my class and choose the option for insert outlet action or outlet collection. And I want to choose an action. And I'm going to make this is the change to family. And it's going to be called by a button only. It happens on touch up inside on the button. And I hit connect. And I'm now going to bring this up on my regular view right here. And so I'm going to, the code I call is perform segue or segue with identifier. So perform segue with identifier. And I pass it as my first parameter, which does not get a label, to family. I pass it a second parameter, which does get a label of sender, the sender from the UI button from my original method call. And so I have that IB action func changed to family. I'm going to perform a segue with identifier. That segue I already made called to family because I made to as the prefix for all of my segues. And I pass it as a reference, the button that's calling it. I'm going to save this and run it. We're going to check this out, make sure it works. My build is successful. I'm going to run my app. Here's my gray screen with my button. I should click on this button. It should take me to my next screen. Hooray. I click this button and nothing happens. That's pretty fantastic.
Woo!
Okay, so let's go ahead and let's make a review what we did, then add a commit. So again, I control dragged from the screen to the associated view controller. I named it change to and the name of the screen I'm going to. Inside there I have one line of code called perform segue with identifier. The parameter is, the first parameter is the name of the segue that I'm using, in this case toFamily, followed by a second parameter of sender colon sender, because this is called sender. So I made that link. That's how I changed from one screen to the second screen. I save that. We're going to do the same thing over here with our other button. So family links to school. So I'm going to click on my family screen. It brings me my family view controller. I click on the button. I control drag from there. I choose what kind of thing? An action. Okay, what's a good name for this action? Change to school. And what type of thing is it? Is it any object or is it a button?
UI button.
It's a UI button. And then I hit connect. And I have my IB action inside there. The method call that I use is perform segue with identifier. And then I give quotes for the first parameter, and it's to school, because that's the name of the segue that I've created. And then the second parameter is sender colon, and the name of the parameter, which is sender. So I have a function I create, change to school. It's called by the sender of UI, it's past sender UI button. I then called a method inside that, perform segue with identifier. The same one, same method call, but instead of calling to family, I call the next screen, which is to school. And I pass it again sender, because that's the value of the button that has been passed right here in the parameter header. I save that, I run it, we'll test it again, make sure it works. I'm on my home screen. Home screen takes me to family screen. Family screen takes me to school screen. Yes! So let's go ahead and make a commit to that. So what do I do first to change from my school to my running screen? I click on the button, okay? I control drag into my view controller. And I get this screen. What do I choose? Okay, I choose action. Very good. Somebody else, what do I name this? Change to running. What kind of type am I sending it as a parameter? A UI button type. And then I hit connect. Okay, so I now have an IB action func, change to running. Has a parameter of UI of sender, which is of type UI button. What line of code do I put inside there to change screens? Perform segue with identifier to running. And my second parameter, it's label first. Sender, not sneeder. And the name of the parameter, sender. So I now have a perform segue with identifier to running, which goes from my school screen to my running screen, which links me right here. And if I click right here, that one is called to running. We can even see it right here, my modal segue to running. Hey, hey, hey. So let's do that last one again for our last screen, from running to home. So I go from my running screen. First step is control drag into my view controller. I insert an outlet. No. I insert an action. Name of this is to home, or change to home. I change this as a UI button. I connect it. My one line of code is what? Perform segue. And my first parameter is a string, which is to home. And my second parameter is of type sender. So my label is sender and my value is sender. Makes that one really easy to remember what to go for that one. I save that. I build it. My build is successful. I run it. My build succeeds again. I run my app. I'm clearly able to swap between every single screen. Okay, so I've now linked it so on all things are linked. So I'm going to add another commit. Linked all buttons to all segues. Now I have one more step I want to do if I want to add like a image file to my project. Many of you guys have images as part of your About Me app. But right now our view on my storyboard, as you can see, has no image. It's just simply a button holder. So we want to make sure we have access to those images that we put in. So in my view group, I'm going to go to assets.xcassets. And in this section, I have my app icon, and I have just the selection area. I'm going to right click on the left-hand panel, and I'm going to go down to import. And I'm going to go grab one of my pictures. In this case, I happen to have my amazing wife. I'll put that one right there. So I have my amaze right there. I'm going to right click again, import. Grab another picture. For school, I have a sample rubric. And I'll insert that one. Or sample Swift method, I'd be even better. And so I have two images that I've added to my XC assets folder, which is inside my view group. Okay, it's like my raw folder, but it's a file that's like a folder because it links it inside itself. Okay, now to add these to my project, I'm going to go back to my GUI, my storyboard, and I'm going to go up to my family one. My family is selected. I'm going to make sure that it's set for 100%, so it's Control Command equals. And I'm going to scroll down in my object library to an image view. And I'm going to put that image view right here. So my image view is now inside that family scene. I'm going to go to the Attributes Inspector. And the image for it, I'm going to put that for my family. I'm going to put my amaze. And I can resize that a bit. And so do you even realize how amazing you are to me for my wife, talking about her? I'm going to go down to my school page, put an image view in it. So drag on image view, put it into my page, and on its lovely attributes inspector, I go to the image view section, I go to the image drop down, and here I'm going to choose a sample Swift method. So now I have a reference right here to a Swift method in my school page. So I'm talking about coding on my school site. I'll hit save. I've now added those images to it, so I want to go to commit. Make sure you use proper English and sentence structure. Add images to XC asset. We notice that inside my about me /XC assets, I have the amaze.jpg. So that added that amaze picture to it. I also added the other one, which is the sample Swift method that's putting it inside the image set for XC assets. So we'll do that again. I'll add one more image to that. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go to my assets.xc assets. I right click in this section. I choose import. I go to where my pictures are saved. I'll add a rubric to it. I'm going to go hit open. So I now have a rubric in here. I have my Swift method and I have my maze icon. So those are all inside that. I save that. I go to my storyboard. I want to add another image view to this. I'll put my rubric in there as an image view as well. And so I click on the image view so it's highlighted. I go to my image thing. I choose my rubric now. So my school page will now have two images. It'll have a sample code image and a rubric image. I save. I run. I click on my button. I have my image that I put on about my wife, how amazing she is. I put my images for my school page right here. My other page has nothing on it yet. I have to add that still. I go back home. Yep. So we've now got that done. What you need to do now is you need to finish making your project so it's like your About Me. Now if you want to add text, there's a couple ways to deal with text. You can go over here. If we scroll in the object list, we have the first thing, we have our text field, which is an editable text. Probably not what you want to use. If you want to simply display text, a label is a much better thing because it's static, unchanging text. And by a label, if I drag that over here onto my running screen to talk about that, I can make my label have multiple lines by default. And so I can have that all set up. I can set my alignment up on that however I wish. So my label is much better choice for showing text to the user. And you definitely want to have multiple lines if it has more than one line's worth of text. So the first thing we did is we made our new groups. We make groups by right-clicking on the project, new, and group. So we have organizing our code. It makes it so we can clean our code up quite a bit. I then, in my view group, I moved assets and main storyboard to my view group. In my controller group, I added my app delegate and view controller by default, and that's where I put all my additional view controllers for each view on my screen. In my storyboard, I created a bunch of screens by adding new view controller instances to my storyboard. I only need one storyboard for the entire project. I then created a view controller for each of my different views. Each of those view controllers are linked to an associated view. So that view is linked to this view controller. This view is linked to that view controller, and so on. I created a segue for each of them by control dragging from each scene to the next, and link that segue to the associated IB action by calling the method perform segue with identifier with that name segue identifier right there. We then tested it out using our simulator, and we can see that our app goes through all the screens, and we made multiple commits to our project as we did this. Okay. So we've now made an app that we can use to actually swap between different screens in iOS to reflect us what we did in App Inventor at the very beginning of the year, and in Java later on, and now with Swift.